Today we're going to look over the drafting phase and how you should think about this very critical time in the game. And we're going to do so by looking over an example of a game that was won almost completely off the draft. And that's going to be SKT versus GE Tigers Game 2 in the LCK. Excellent game, by the way, and if you ever want to look at some really high level gameplay, I highly recommend that you look at this entire set. So we're going to jump right into it. And GE bans Ahri and Ezreal. Now Ahri, very strong pick right now in the meta with the changes to her movement speed on the Q and the charm and whatnot. Janet banned by SKT. Just don't want to deal with the Janna. They played against it last game. Gorilla, excellent Janna player. GE Tigers bans Ezreal. One of Faker's main champions nowadays. He's been playing Ezreal very well. And last game he played Ezreal in the game 1. So they don't want to deal with that again. SKT bans Lulu now. GE Tigers has a really strong Lulu composition running the Lulu Nami with the Kog'Maw. So they just get rid of it right off the bat. An ambiguous pick that can be used to really throw the opponent off guard. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Faker has been undefeated on LeBlanc his entire career, and the GE Tigers last banned Lissandra. Now, Lissandra is known to do really well against LeBlanc because every time that LeBlanc goes into combo someone or harass, Lissandra can just ulti her and kill her right there on the spot. Now, last game they banned Lissandra. Now with the Lissandra ban, you're thinking, you know what, maybe they're looking for that first pick Lissandra. Let's see what happens next. And to everyone's surprise, SKT bans the Veigar that the GE ran last game. Veigar support, really strong to be honest, unconventional, coming up new, and this is where it really interested me. So the GE Tigers first pick Kassadin. Now Kassadin is an ambiguous pick. So we know that he has a weak early game, has a really strong late game, has a kind of okay mid game, really mobile champion, but can be bullied in lane, right? He has a difficult time in lane, especially in matchups top versus bruisers. SKT locks in Gnar Corki. So right off the bat, this is where it gets really interesting. Right off the bat, Kassadin, if he chooses to go top lane, he's going to have to lane against Gnar, which would put Kassadin in a really suboptimal spot, because if SKT picks a heavy ganking jungler, they're going to be able to really punish that Kassadin in the early game and potentially snowball off that, because it's a really easy lane for Gnar to get free farm, push it constantly, and Kassadin to just CS in their tower. And now they also lock in a Corki. So right off the bat, you have a nice wave clear bottom lane, a good AD carry for the mid game, good poke. Poke is pretty good against Kassadin, especially magic damage poke, because Kassadin is going to be rushing that Zhonya's early. Like usually the Kassadin build is Roa with the Zhonya's, which means that burst carries like Graves could have a little bit of a harder time bursting down that Kassadin. So Corki does a little bit more damage to him, gets some poke in him, he might hesitate on going in. And this is where GE makes a pretty big mistake, because by locking in that Kassadin right off the bat, you know that Faker is going to pick LeBlanc. The last pick LeBlanc is obviously coming out. There is no Ahri left, there is no Lissandra left, and LeBlanc does really well against Kassadin. It's not a Kassadin favored matchup, it's a complete skill matchup, and to be honest, you do not want to take the skill matchup versus Faker mid lane. I don't know how many times people have to look at him school people on LeBlanc, but anyways, here's another thing about the SKT champions that they picked. They are very difficult to gank. This is the crucial part about this. Gnar is not an easy target to gank, and same goes with Corki. But what does GE pick? They end up locking in a Jarvan with a Rumble. This is where I think it was almost solidified for them, because you pick a heavy ganking jungler and a really weak early game. So now all of a sudden you have two lanes that are going to be really weak in the early phase. They're going to get pushed in. Gnar is going to be able to push into the Rumble. You know, it's an even matchup. No one's going to get killed, but Gnar should have the pressure on that. And for Jarvan to be able to get a gank on the Rumble on the Rumble lane against Gnar, he's going to have a really hard time doing so. And against the Corki is really strong versus Jarvan. You know, he can Valk out of the Cataclysm really easily. He can poke him before deciding to engage. He's a mobile champion because he gets that first mobility item early game with Trinity Force, so he's even harder to lock down. And now here is where the SKT picks, when I looked at them, I was a little confused and thought, you know what? I'm not sure if I can get this, where I can see where this is going. But after looking how the game played out, and it all makes sense because they lock in the Thresh Nunu. Now you're thinking, Nunu, why would you pick Nunu? All you know is that they have Kassadin, Jarvan, and Rumble. That doesn't make sense. Why would you? Nunu is really good against heavy auto attack champions, but they went double AP. I would never pick Nunu into this. Who would ever pick Nunu into this? Well, the reason is that ends up resulting in you tunnel visioning as to the aspects that Nunu can do. They did not pick Nunu to counter the double AP. They picked Nunu for another reason, which I'll get into in a little bit. But first of all, also consider that Nunu is actually not bad versus Kassadin and Rumble because these are melee range mages. Kassadin has to be in your face, so he's very susceptible to getting hit with snowballs or a nice absolute zero, resulting in having to flash or rift walk out. Rumble, sure, his ultimate is long range, but his main kit is short range, so he's going to have to walk by the Nunu to get by. And then the Thresh pick, that's the one that was just beautiful because Thresh is not only going to be able to get anybody out of the Cataclysm, he's going to be able to flay Jarvan out of his flag and drag combo. He's going to be able to rescue anybody out of the Rumble ult equalizer. He's going to be able to get anybody that's getting chased down by Kassadin really well. And to top things off, Thresh is a really strong roaming champion versus weak lanes that he's going to be able to have a really easy time sneaking behind them and really punishing them, while Corki is a really safe AD carry to farm, especially at level 6. So Corki is going to have a really easy time when Thresh leaves his lane, just farming from the tower, using your phosphorus bomb, your missile rockets, I don't know the name of them, but the rockets to farm. So Thresh can afford to leave the lane. But the Nunu pick, the beauty of the Nunu pick, is that it's not to counter the team comp, it's to counter specifically the Jarvan, because what happens is now GE Tigers no longer has a target to gank. Like, Jarvan cannot go and gank top lane easily. He cannot gank bottom lane easily. And you cannot pick the jungler easily because Nunu is a champion that, unlike most junglers, is not building the warrior's enchantment first, right? He's not investing a lot of money early into damage. In fact, he invested almost all into health items, including Sightstone and the Juggernaut jungle item, meaning that he would be a really difficult target to be bursted down if he were to invade by Kassadin and Jarvan. So he's really safe. So right off the bat, Jarvan has almost no options as to where to go to gank. And then they pick the Kalista Morgana. Now, I'm not really sure what they were thinking with these two picks, but at this point, your main team composition has already kind of faltered, and then you pick kind of a skill shot AD carry, a good AD carry against Corki. I guess if you duel him 1v1, he's pretty good. Kalista can be really good against Corki in that sense, but SKT would never let that happen. They would just want to do something else. You don't want to be put in that situation. And then the Morgana to kind of protect the Kalista or the Kassadin, whoever was to go in. But consider that Nunu is even then still really good into the Kalista because one snowball completely hinders her mobility. So she has to kite back, and with all the poke coming out from poke and threat and zoning from Box, from Jarb, from Gnar ultimate, from Nunu absolute zero, Kalista could have a difficult time going in. Same goes with the Morgana. She isn't really stopping anything besides the Thresh ultimate, but it is a nice combo to combo in with the AoE magic damage that you have already on GE Tigers. So, you toss the Morgana in, she AoEs everyone, Kassadin goes in, gets more slows, same with the equalizer, all this kind of stuff. But the problem is that this team comp lacks hard CC. They don't have actual stuns. The only stun would be the second tick of Morgana ultimate Callista ultimate, and Jarvan flag. All pretty difficult skill shots to land versus the entire SKT lineup that has already been presented. And then, of course, the pick that we all expected would happen right at the end gets picked up by SKT, and they go in with the LeBlanc. So they lock in LeBlanc, and now what does GE do? They really can't do that much because ganking the LeBlanc that early is going to be pretty difficult for the Jarvan. Now, he actually ends up getting a gank in this game into the LeBlanc, but her passive allows her to escape. And that was really the only saving grace because all the lanes have really not that much kill pressure on SKT's lanes. And Nunu was used beautifully to neutralize the Jarvan even from the first buff on, because what Nunu did was he did it Grump with the leash from this bottom lane in a regular 2v2 situation, and then invaded the Jarvan's red buff, stole the red, and then just went on his merry way, making sure that Jarvan gets his red buff out of the way. And in situations where the ganks aren't completely guaranteed because there isn't that great of a setup for the Jarvan lanes, for the lanes that Jarvan has to gank, the red buff is really the thing that's going to make the difference, whether they get the kill, whether they get a summoner or not. And without the red, Nunu did a wonderful job. And then eventually what happened was every lane just kind of got pushed in constantly, especially the solo lanes, allowing LeBlanc to roam freely with the Thresh, because as I mentioned before, Thresh is able to leave the lane and have Corki by himself, farm alone, and make plays together. And Thresh enabled a kill on mid lane, a kill on top lane, and then the game snowballed from there because the GE Tigers never got to snowball with the team comp that they had because their early game was completely neutralized by SKT. And then eventually LeBlanc just ended up two-shotting anybody in the map. And this is a really good example also as to why Jarvan is not as effective anymore, because the meta used to have a lot of really immobile champions, right? Everybody would pick the Nami, you'd pick the Annie. I guess Annie's still in flavor, but you'd pick really immobile champions like Nami, Janna. They're things that are really difficult to gank. Same goes with the mid lane. You'd have your Xerath, your Orianna, some other, I really can't remember off the top of my head. And with the top laners, you'd have a little bit of a squishier top laners with Lulus. And now that people have moved into more difficult to kill champions that are a little bit more mobile, especially with the return of Corki, people thought he was bad after he got nerfed, but he's still good. Jarvan has a really difficult time making anything happen if his lanes are really difficult to set up for, especially if the enemy team creates picks with their creates champion picks that are really just great against Jarvan. Like, Jarvan can never get a Cataclysm off on LeBlanc and trap her there. Same goes with a combo. Same goes with Corki. Corki's never going to use his Valkyrie forward. He's just going to get out. Then you have the Thresh. And this is a prime example as to how to counter an entire team comp just from the draft and just win off the laning phase. For those that actually take the time and watch this game, you'll see that this game was lost in the laning phase. It's not that Smeb is significantly better than Marin. It's not that Kuro got killed 100 times by Faker. It's not that Gorilla and Prey lost bottom lane horrendously. It's that their team comp just wasn't able to do anything in that early game, in that laning phase. And SKT capitalized on it with their champions and just flat out won from that. And I hope that you guys take this knowledge and kind of think about all the little aspects of a team composition that go into the draft and see how you can string it together to get a really strong comp and see what the enemy wants to do against yours and kind of counter that and have a really nice, almost chess-like match. With that being said, don't take this as a guidebook or a rule of everything that was said is accurate, because it's not. It's all susceptible to opinion. And you know what? The G Tigers could have done anything. Of course they could have done anything. They could have first picked LeBlanc. They could have first picked this, and the draft could have been completely different, and all these scenarios could have happened. You know, they could have gone with a Vi instead. They could have taken the Nunu and gone with like a Cassidy and Nunu comp like Snake would. They could have done 1,000 different things. But this is just explaining how the decisions that they made ended up creating the results that happened in this game. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and thank you for watching. And if you'd like to see any videos in the future, just feel free to suggest what you want to see them about. And if I can think of a way to actually make that come to life, I'll be glad to do so.